The sky above the sacred mountain didn't darken the way it normally did when evil gathered. There was no gradual dimming of the sun, no slow crawl of storm clouds across the horizon, no creeping chill that warned animals to flee. When Babidi's ritual reached its crescendo that evening, the sky simply tore. One moment there was a bruised purple twilight hanging over the mountain plateau where the sorcerer's ship had landed, and the next there was a wound in reality itself. A jagged gash of burning orange and black, crackling at its edges like paper held too close to a flame, yawning open between dimensions with the groan of something that had never been meant to be moved. Babidi hadn't planned this. The small sorcerer stood at the center of his summoning circle, his enormous eyes wide behind his wrinkled face, his stubby fingers trembling. The spell was supposed to feed on ambient dark energy, drawing evil souls toward the barrier separating Boo's egg from the world of the living. It had worked beautifully for weeks. Every cruel act, every selfish murder, every drop of spilled blood had been funneled upward like smoke into a chimney. But something had gone wrong in the calculations. The ritual had reached further than intended, punched through the membrane between universes, the way a fist punches through wet paper, and grabbed hold of something on the other side that was soaked so thoroughly in supernatural darkness that the spell had simply yanked. The tear in the sky pulsed once. Then, with a sound like 1,000 souls screaming simultaneously, something came through. When it hit the mountainside in a column of fire that wasn't orange or yellow or any color flame was supposed to be, it was the specific, nauseating red of hellfire. The kind of fire that didn't burn wood or flesh, but burned guilt. That didn't illuminate darkness, but made the darkness aware of itself. The impact crater it left was perfectly circular, 30 feet across, and the rock at its center had been fused into something that looked almost like obsidian glass. Dust and pulverized stone rolled outward in waves. And from the center of the crater, something rose. The motorcycle came first, a machine that had no right to exist. Its frame wreathed in living flame, its tires leaving scorched imprints on the fused rock as they found purchase. The engine sound it produced wasn't mechanical. It was a rumble that seemed to originate somewhere below hearing, somewhere in the chest cavity, somewhere primal and terrified. Its headlight burned with the same hellish red as the fire that coated every inch of it. And the chains wrapped around its chassis clinked softly as the rider straightened in the saddle. He had no face. Not exactly. He had a skull. Bleached white and perfect, every tooth present, every socket empty except for the twin points of hellfire that served as his eyes. The leather jacket across his broad shoulders was scorched at the edges. The chains coiled at his side moved with a quiet, anticipatory restlessness, like snakes that had already chosen their target and were simply waiting for the order. Ghost Rider rolled the bike forward one slow rotation and stopped. He turned the skull left, then right, me surveying the mountain plateau with those burning eyes. The air around him smelled of sulfur and scorched stone and something older. The smell of judgment, if judgment had a smell. He had been mid-pursuit in his own world, chasing a soul that had earned every inch of what was coming to it. And then reality had grabbed him. And here he was, in a world that felt different, in a way that was difficult to articulate. The darkness here was thicker. The evil was louder. Somewhere close, very close, something ancient and profoundly wrong was sleeping. And the spirit of vengeance could feel it the way a compass feels north. Babidi recovered faster than any reasonable person should have. "Oh," the little sorcerer breathed. His voice caught somewhere between terror and professional assessment. His eyes traveled up and down the flaming figure on the motorcycle with the calculating attention of someone who collected supernatural power the way others collected stamps. "Oh, interesting." Ghost Rider's skull turned toward him. Babidi took one step backward. Then, because he was Babidi, he took one step forward again. "You are not from this dimension," he said, more to himself than to his guest. "But the power reading, the dark energy radiating off you, is extraordinary. The spell pulled you here for a reason. This level of infernal energy could accelerate the ritual by weeks." He clasped his small hands together, a smile spreading across his wizened face. "I believe this was a happy accident." The chain moved. It uncoiled from Ghost Rider's side with a sound like a thunderclap, crossed 30 feet of air in a fraction of a second, and embedded its spiked tip 6 inches into the rock directly between Babidi's feet. The impact sent a shockwave of hellfire rolling outward across the plateau. Babidi stumbled backward, his eyes now entirely the size of dinner plates, his earlier confidence evaporating with impressive speed. "Innocent," Ghost Rider said. The voice that came from that flaming skull was not one voice. It was many, layered, resonant, the sound of a verdict being read in a courthouse that predated the universe. Or guilty. He stared at Babidi. The sorcerer felt something he hadn't felt since childhood. The specific, paralyzing cold of being truly, completely seen. Not assessed for power, not measured for usefulness. Seen. Every cruelty. Every soul consumed for the ritual. Every life spent in the service of waking something that shouldn't be woken. No, Babidi ran. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. The adventure never ends. Ghost Rider didn't chase him. Not yet. He turned the skull slowly back toward the tear in the sky, which was already closing, stitching itself shut with thin threads of dimensional membrane. The way home was sealing. The spirit of vengeance watched it close with the patience of something that had no particular attachment to schedules. Then he turned back toward the mountain. Somewhere below, in a chamber buried under miles of stone and dark magic, that ancient wrongness continued to pulse. A heartbeat without a heart. An appetite without a stomach. Whatever it was enormous. And it was evil. And it was sleeping. And Ghost Rider had arrived in this universe at precisely the moment that sleeping thing was closest to waking. The engine roared. The tires left twin trails of hellfire across the plateau as the bike accelerated toward the edge of the mountain, launched into open air, and continued riding. Because gravity had never had much authority over the spirit of vengeance. Down toward the valley below, toward the sorcerer who had fled, toward the evil that waited, toward a universe that had no idea what had just arrived inside it. Above the mountain, the tear finally sealed shut with a sound like a whisper. The night smelled like hell. Dabura didn't frighten easily. This was a being who had ruled the demon realm for centuries, who had turned warriors to stone with a single breath, who had looked Gohan, a half-Saiyan with enough suppressed power to crack the planet, directly in the eyes and felt nothing but mild professional interest. Fear was a concept Dabura understood the way a sculptor understands marble, as something to be shaped in others, never experienced himself. He was the king of the demon realm. He was Babidi's greatest weapon. He had stood in the presence of Majin Buu's egg and felt its sleeping malevolence wash over him like a warm bath. He was not prepared for the thing that rode out of the darkness on a burning motorcycle. Babidi had come screaming back to the ship, his small legs moving with a frantic energy that would have been comedic under any other circumstances, babbling about chains and skulls and hellfire and judgment. Dabura had listened with the patient condescension he reserved for his master's more dramatic moments, then stepped outside to deal with whatever had rattled the little sorcerer so completely. He saw the trail of burning tire tracks leading down the mountainside first. Then he saw the red glow moving through the valley below. Not the red of a Kai blast or an energy signature, but something deeper. Something that his demonic instincts categorized not as power, but as authority. His eyes narrowed. He dropped into a combat stance out of pure reflex, his cape settling around him, his swords materializing in his hands with practiced ease. Ghost Rider crested the valley ridge and stopped. For a long moment, the two beings regarded each other across 200 meters of open terrain. The night was very quiet. The hellfire coating the motorcycle's frame cast dancing red shadows across the rocks. And in that flickering light, Dabura looked less like a king and more like what he actually was. A soul with an extraordinarily long list of sins attached to it, standing in front of the one entity in any universe specifically designed to care about that list. "You," Dabura said carefully, his voice carrying across the valley with regal precision, "are not from this world." Ghost Rider said nothing. The chains at his side moved with that slow, pendulum restlessness. "I am Dabura," the Demon King continued, because announcing himself was reflex at this point. "King of the demon realm. Whatever dimension you've crawled out of, whatever power you think you carry, you are in my territory now." He raised one sword, its edge catching the hellfire glow. "Leave, or I will turn you to stone and add your skull to my collection." The chain launched. It didn't travel in a straight line. It moved the way a living thing moves. With intention, with course correction, with the specific intelligence of a weapon that knew where its target was going before the target did. Dabura brought both swords up in a cross guard, expecting to deflect it, and the chain wrapped around both blades simultaneously, yanked with force that staggered even the Demon King's considerable frame, and then ripped both weapons from his hands with a sound of protesting metal. Dabura blinked. In 3,000 years of combat, no one had disarmed him in the opening exchange. He pivoted immediately, his mouth opening to unleash his stone breath. That signature technique that had petrified Krillin and Piccolo in seconds. That had forced Gohan to fight with the brutal calculus of destroying his own friends to deny Dabura the weapons their stone bodies represented. The breath that turned anything it touched to cold, permanent stone. Ghost Rider drove directly into it. The stone breath washed over the flaming skull and the burning jacket and the hellfire motorcycle and achieved absolutely nothing. Stone requires organic matter. Stone requires something biological to calcify, cells to harden, living tissue to freeze. And the spirit of vengeance had not been biological in a very long time. The breath dissipated against the hellfire like fog burning off in morning sun, and Ghost Rider's burning eyes never even flickered. Dabura had approximately 1 second to process this information before the chain returned. It wrapped around his wrist. The hellfire conducted through the links hit Dabura with something that wasn't pain exactly. Pain was too simple a word for what the Demon King experienced in that moment. It was memory. Every soul he had consumed in the demon realm. Every warrior broken for sport, every servant destroyed for failure. 3,000 years of casual cruelty compressed into a single instant and fed back through the chain directly into the nerve endings behind his eyes. Dabura screamed. It was not the battle cry of a warrior. It was the raw, an animal sound of someone meeting the full weight of their own history for the first time. Ghost Rider pulled the chain back and let Dabura crumple to one knee on the valley floor, breathing hard, one hand pressed against the side of his head as though he could physically hold back what he'd just experienced. The Demon King looked up at the spirit of vengeance, with something new in his expression. Not fear exactly, but its sophisticated, older cousin. Recognition. The understanding that the hierarchy he'd operated within his entire existence had just been interrupted by something that didn't acknowledge hierarchies. "What?" Deborah said quietly. "Are you?" Ghost Rider dismounted. The ground where his boots landed scorched black in perfect boot-shaped impressions. He walked toward Deborah with the unhurried pace of something that has never once needed to rush, and the burning eyes in that flawless skull focused with an intensity that made the air between them shimmer. "Look at me," Ghost Rider said. "Deborah, Demon King, 3,000-year ruler of his realm, servant of Babidi, one of the most dangerous beings on Earth." Looked, the pennant's stare ignited. It wasn't a beam. It wasn't a blast. It was a connection, direct, unblockable, perfectly intimate, between Ghost Rider's burning eyes and Deborah's own. And through that connection flowed every sin, not reviewed from a distance, not observed with detachment. Felt. Every death, every cruelty, every moment of deliberate, chosen evil across 3,000 years of demonic existence returned to its author simultaneously, experienced from the perspective of every victim at once. Deborah's body locked rigid, his eyes went white. He toppled sideways onto the scorched earth like a felled tree, completely unconscious, his immense power entirely irrelevant to what had just been done to him. The Demon King of the Demon Realm lay in the dirt of a valley on a planet he had intended to help destroy, brought down not by a stronger fighter, but by the simple, terrible mechanism of being made to feel exactly what he had spent 3 millennia making others feel. Ghost Rider looked down at him for a moment. Then the burning eyes rose toward the horizon, where, far in the distance, 5 separate K signatures had just spiked with sudden, urgent alarm. They had felt the hellfire. They were coming. Gohan felt it first. He was sparring with Videl 3 miles from the mountain when the sensation hit him. Not through his Kai sense exactly, because whatever was radiating from that valley didn't register as Ki. Ki had a quality to it, a texture that trained fighters learned to read the way musicians read sheet music. Strong Ki felt like pressure. Godly Ki felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Evil Ki felt like cold water filling a room. This felt like standing in a courthouse and knowing, without looking at the docket, that your name was on it. Gohan went still mid-strike, his fist stopping an inch from Videl's guard, his eyes cutting sharply toward the northwest. The night sky in that direction had a faint reddish undertone. Not the orange of fire, not the purple of a Ki blast. Something older, and something that made the Saiyan blood in his veins send a very clear and unambiguous message to the rest of his body. Pay attention. Gohan? Videl lowered her hands. What is it? I don't know, he said honestly. Then, stay here. He was in the air before she could argue. Across the city, Goku's head snapped up from the dinner table with an expression that his family had learned to interpret with weary accuracy. The wide eyes, the slight tilt of the head, the way his chopsticks lowered with the careful deliberation of someone setting down something fragile. Chi-Chi recognized the look. She had seen it approximately 400 times. It was the look that preceded him disappearing for varying lengths of time and returning either victorious or dead. Goku, she said. There's something out there, he said. His brow furrowed with the specific concentration of someone trying to tune a radio frequency they'd never encountered before. The sensation coming from the northwest wasn't Ki. He was certain of that. He had felt Ki his entire life, had learned to distinguish between power levels the way others distinguish between voices. And whatever this was, It wasn't operating on the same frequency, but it was strong. The sheer supernatural presence of it registered even through his normal senses as something significant. It's not key, but it's... He searched for the word. It's like when you're fighting someone and you realize mid-punch that they're a lot more serious than they were letting on. Then he felt Dabura's key signature simply stop. Not power down, not retreat. Stop. The way a flame stops when you put a jar over it, unsudden and total and permanent. Goku was outside and airborne in the same motion, his orange guy catching the night wind, his expression shifting from curious to focused with the ease of long practice. Whatever had just dropped Dabura, who had given Gohan a genuine fight, who had turned Piccolo and Krillin to stone in seconds. That was the thing worth paying attention to. He arrived at the valley 3 minutes later. The first thing he registered was the smell. Sulfur and scorched rock, familiar from various Kai-intensive battles, layered over something he didn't have a reference point for. Something ancient and smoky and solemn, like incense in a building that had been burning candles for 10,000 years. The second thing he registered was Dabura, unconscious on the valley floor, completely undamaged physically but utterly, profoundly out. The third thing he registered was the source of the red glow, and his brain took a full extra second to process what he was seeing. A skeleton on a burning motorcycle, sitting perfectly still, watching him arrive. Goku landed 20 meters away and straightened up, his hands loose at his sides, his Kai rising instinctively to a comfortable baseline. Not threatening, not suppressed. The fighter's equivalent of standing straight without puffing out your chest. He looked at the skull, at the hellfire, at the chains, at the burning eye sockets, and his expression did something remarkable. It lit up. "Wow," Goku said, with the pure, uncomplicated delight of someone who has just been shown something genuinely new. "I've never felt anything like you before." He tilted his head. "I'm trying to get a ki reading and getting nothing coherent." "What kind of power is that?" "It's not ki, right? I can sort of feel it, but I can't really measure it." Ghost Rider regarded him. The spirit of vengeance had arrived in this universe through a doorway torn by dark magic, had already dismantled the Demon King of the Demon Realm, and was currently being greeted with the enthusiasm of a child meeting a new dog. The burning eyes moved across Goku's frame with the stare's ambient assessment, the passive reading of soul weight that Ghost Rider maintained without activating fully, and encountered something genuinely unusual. Clean, not perfectly clean. Goku had fought, had caused destruction, had made choices that cost lives, both through action and inaction. But the intent threaded through all of it was so transparently, almost absurdly pure. The honest love of combat, the genuine desire to protect, the complete absence of cruelty, that the pennant stare had almost nothing to grip. Judging Goku would be like trying to find the stain on something that had never been dirty. Ghost Rider tilted the skull slightly. Interesting. Gohan arrived seconds later, dropping from the sky with considerably more caution than his father, landing at Goku's shoulder and staring at the burning figure with wide eyes. His own passive reading came back similar to his father's. Wrong frequency, unclassifiable, but the weight of it was enormous. He had felt Beerus's Kai from a distance once, had understood on a molecular level that it represented a category of power beyond the ones he'd trained within. This was different, not stronger necessarily, but other, and it existed in a different column entirely. "Dad," Gohan said quietly, "what is that?" "Not sure yet," Goku admitted. He took a small step forward, raising one hand in the universal gesture of non-aggression. "Hey, I'm Goku. I don't know where you came from. But you just took down Dabura, which means you're either really strong or you have an ability the rest of us don't. Probably both. The grin broke through, unstoppable as sunrise. Either way, I'd really like to know more about you. Ghost Rider looked at him for a long moment. Then the burning gaze shifted to Gohan. The reading was different here. Heavier, more complicated. Not sinful, but burdened. The weight of suppressed power, of choosing not to fight, of watching violence that could have been stopped sooner. When the passive assessment moved across Gohan's soul like a hand moving across a wall in the dark, feeling the texture of it. There is great evil nearby, Ghost Rider said finally. The layered voice rolled across the valley like distant thunder. Something ancient. Something sleeping. The burning eyes returned to Goku. It must not wake. Goku's expression sobered. Yeah, he said quietly. We know. Vegeta arrived 9 minutes after Goku. This was not because he was slower. Vegeta was, in most measurable respects, exactly as fast as Goku, and in several contexts faster. He had arrived 9 minutes late, because when the strange Ki-adjacent energy spike had crashed through his senses while he was training in the Capsule Corporation gravity chamber, he had spent 6 of those minutes standing in the center of the chamber at 400 times Earth's gravity. Arms crossed, eyes closed, running a precise internal assessment of what he had felt before deciding it merited personal investigation. He descended into the valley with his arms still crossed. The scene he found was Dabura, unconscious, on scorched earth. His son and his eternal rival standing 20 meters from a flaming skeleton on a motorcycle, or Goku wearing the expression he reserved for things he found exciting, Gohan wearing the expression he reserved for things he found alarming. The skeleton itself radiated something that Vegeta's Kai sense translated as enormous, other, and this was the part that Vegeta spent exactly no time acknowledging consciously. Unsettling. He landed between Goku and the figure and finally uncrossed his arms. What? Said Vegeta, surveying the burning figure with the flat assessment of someone appraising livestock. Is this? Vegeta! Goku's face brightened further, which Vegeta found deeply irritating. Perfect timing. This guy just took out Dabura. I can see that. Vegeta's gaze moved to Dabura's prone form, then back to the skull. How? He looked at him. Gohan offered. Vegeta stared at Gohan, then back at the skull, then at Dabura. The Saiyan Prince's jaw tightened with the specific tension of someone whose established model of how power and combat worked had just been handed a complication it wasn't sure how to file. He stepped forward, putting himself slightly ahead of Goku in the unconscious territorial geometry that defined their relationship, and fixed the burning eye sockets with the direct, aggressive stare that he typically deployed when he wanted an opponent to understand immediately that he was not afraid of them. I am Vegeta, he said, Prince of all Saiyans. Whatever you did to the Demon King, whatever ability that was, power like that exists for one reason: to be tested against the strongest. And the strongest here is me. He let his ki rise, the familiar white-blue aura crackling to life around him, with the air pressure in a 20-meter radius dropping perceptibly as his energy output climbed. Rocks lifted off the valley floor and began orbiting him lazily. So, let's establish something. Right now. Ghost Rider looked at Vegeta. The passive assessment moved across the Prince of all Saiyans the way a searchlight moves across open water, slow, thorough, finding everything. What it found was substantial. Vegeta's soul was not clean. It was not remotely close to clean. Genocide. The destruction of civilizations. A childhood spent being weaponized by a monster then decades spent choosing to continue being that monster after the original monster was gone. Every planet culled under Frieza's orders that Vegeta had carried out without resistance. Yet every fighter killed not in honest battle, but in the exercise of power over those who couldn't match it. The soul of the Prince of all Saiyans was a landscape that the Penance Stare could work with for a very long time. But there was something else in there too. Ghost Rider noticed it the way you notice a single lit window in an otherwise dark building. Buried under the accumulated weight of everything Vegeta had done was something that was, if not redemption, then at least its sincere precondition. The genuine, grinding, painful effort to become something other than what he had been. Not for peace, not from weakness, but from the specific Saiyan stubbornness that had turned his pride, which had once been entirely destructive, into something that now occasionally pointed at protecting his family, at surpassing his own worst self, as at refusing to let Kakarot be the only one who grew. It was a small light, but it was real. Ghost Rider did not deploy the full Penance Stare. Vegeta's ki aura spiked higher, misreading the skull's stillness as hesitation, and the rocks orbiting him began to crack under the pressure. "Well?" he demanded. "Or are you only able to fight sleeping demons and sorcerers?" "Vegeta," Gohan said carefully, "stay out of this, boy." Ghost Rider stepped off the motorcycle. The moment his boots hit the ground, the hellfire around the bike dimmed slightly, as though the machine itself was settling into standby. The chains uncoiled from his shoulders with that slow, deliberate movement, not striking, not threatening, but positioning. The burning eyes fixed on Vegeta with an attention that the prince found, despite every effort to prevent it, deeply uncomfortable. "Your pride," Ghost Rider said, "is not your sin." Vegeta's aura flickered. "What?" "Your pride." The layered voice moved through the valley air like smoke through a hallway. "It is not clean. Nothing about you is clean. But the pride, that is the thing that kept you from becoming nothing. I have seen men break completely under what you carry. You did not break." A pause. The hellfire crackled. "That is not forgiveness, but it is fact." Vegeta stood very still. This was the problem with Ghost Rider's presence that no scouter, no key reading, no battle power assessment could have prepared any of them for. He didn't fight the way fighters fought. He didn't threaten the way villains threatened. He simply looked at you, really looked, and said true things in that terrible layered voice. And the true things landed with a weight that Kai blasts and energy waves couldn't match, because they bypassed the body entirely and went straight to the part of you that already knew they were true. Vegeta's aura slowly powered down, not in defeat, not in submission. In the careful, controlled way of someone choosing to step back from an edge they'd approached without fully intending to. "You're not here to fight," Vegeta said. It came out less like an accusation and more like something he was working out in real time. "I am here," Ghost Rider said, turning back toward the direction of Babidi ship, "because evil called me, and evil is still here." The burning eyes found each of them in turn. Goku, Gohan, Vegeta. The thing sleeping in this ground. I can feel it from here. It is ancient, and it is wrong, and it is almost awake. He reached back and took the chain in one hand, the links glowing dull red in his grip. "Are you going to stop it? Or aren't you?" Goku looked at Vegeta. Vegeta looked at Goku. The unspoken exchange between them lasted approximately 1 second and covered, in that 1 second, the entire complicated architecture of their rivalry, their grudging respect, their shared understanding of when something was bigger than both of them. "We were working on it," Goku said. The walk to Babidi's ship took 12 minutes. Nobody flew. This was Ghost Rider's doing, not by request or instruction, but by the simple gravitational reality that the spirit of vengeance moved at ground level on a burning motorcycle. And somehow, in the strange reorganization of priorities that his presence imposed on everything around him, flying overhead felt wrong. Like arriving at a funeral in a sports car. Goku walked on Ghost Rider's left. Gohan walked slightly behind. Vegeta walked on the right, arms crossed, maintaining the precise body language of someone who had chosen to walk in this direction for entirely his own reasons that had nothing to do with anyone else's decisions. The valley gave way to scrubland, and which gave way to the blasted rock plateau where Babidi's ship sat like a bad tooth in an otherwise unremarkable jaw of mountain. Goku broke the silence at the 4-minute mark. "So that thing you did to Daburi," he said, with the conversational ease of someone asking about a fishing technique. "The looking thing, how does it work?" Ghost Rider considered this with the patience of something that had answered stranger questions. "Every living being carries the weight of what they have done," he said. "Every choice, every cruelty. The penance stare takes that weight and returns it, all at once, from the perspective of those who received the cruelty." The chains clinked softly against the motorcycle frame. Most cannot bear it. Goku processed this. A pause. "So it works on anyone?" "Anyone with a soul," Ghost Rider said. "Or anyone who has caused suffering and remembers it, even if they pretend they don't. What about someone who genuinely doesn't feel bad about anything they've done?" Gohan asked from behind them. He was thinking, clearly, about specific individuals they were all aware of. "Those are the ones," Ghost Rider said, "who experience it most completely." Vegeta made a quiet sound that might have been acknowledgement and might have been something else entirely. "What about Buu?" Goku asked. The question landed with more weight than his casual tone suggested. He had been turning it over since Ghost Rider mentioned the sleeping evil, fitting it against what he knew about Majin Buu, about the thing's nature, its history, its relationship to concepts like guilt and suffering, and the specific internal architecture that the penance stare apparently required to function. Buu he's not like Dabura. He doesn't really think the way we think. He doesn't have, like, a moral sense of what he's done wrong. It's not that he knows and doesn't care. It's more like the categories don't exist for him. Ghost Rider was quiet for long enough that Goku wondered if he hadn't heard. Then, "I know." The two words carried something in them. Not uncertainty, which seemed incompatible with the spirit of vengeance, but acknowledgement. The recognition of a specific problem already identified and not yet solved. "You've already thought about it," Gohan said. "From the moment I felt what was sleeping here," Ghost Rider confirmed. "A being of pure chaos, pure appetite, no guilt because no moral architecture to produce guilt." The burning eyes stayed forward. "The stare requires something to reflect. If there is nothing to reflect, it doesn't work," Vegeta finished. He said it bluntly, not cruelly, in the tone of someone who respects directness. He glanced sideways at the flaming skull. "So your primary weapon is useless against the primary threat?" "The stare is not my only weapon," Ghost Rider said. "No," Vegeta agreed, watching the chains. "I can see that." They reached the base of the ship. Babidi was waiting for them, which was either very brave or very stupid. He stood on the ship's lowered entry ramp, with his enormous eyes darting between Ghost Rider and the three Saiyans, his hands clasped in front of him in a gesture that managed to suggest both supplication and negotiation simultaneously. Behind him, The interior of the ship hummed with the dark energy of an active resurrection ritual. The sound of it was low and rhythmic, like a second heartbeat. "Let's not be hasty," Babidi said. Ghost Rider stopped the motorcycle 20 feet from the ramp. The engine sound dropped to that subsonic rumble. The hellfire reflected off the ship's metal hull in rippling red waves. "The ritual," Ghost Rider said. "Stop it." "I'm afraid I can't do that." Babidi's voice had recovered most of its composure, which was genuinely impressive given recent events. "Do you understand what's in there? What I've spent years preparing? The most powerful being ever to exist, power that makes your little skull-faced trick look like a birthday candle." He gestured at the three scions with a dismissive sweep. "What they've seen of power. What you've seen. Or Majin Buu will redefine every ceiling any of you thought existed. Then he must be stopped before he wakes," Ghost Rider said simply. "I agree," said Vegeta, and blasted the ship. The final flash wasn't full power. Vegeta had done the rapid internal calculation of a man who had been blowing up ships since childhood and understood structural vulnerabilities. But it was enough. It hit the ritual chamber's external housing with a concussive impact that cracked the hull in 3 places and sent Babidi tumbling backward off the ramp with a shriek of outrage. The heartbeat rhythm coming from inside the ship stuttered, then resumed. Stronger. "That," Gohan said quietly, reading the energy signature from the interior with growing alarm, "made it worse." Goku was already moving toward the ship, the internal structures reinforced with dark magic. "Physical damage feeds the ritual, doesn't it?" He looked at Babidi, who was picking himself up from the dirt with the furious dignity of a very small man in a very big situation. "Doesn't it?" Babidi smoothed his robe with trembling hands. "Every attack you make on this ship," he said, and now the fear in his voice was layered over something that sounded almost like genuine awe, "is another offering. You cannot stop this with force." He looked at Ghost Rider. "And you cannot stop this with your little soul-reading trick. Buu has no soul to read, which means spirit of vengeance, that in this specific situation, you are." He searched for the word, "decorative." Ghost Rider dismounted. He walked to the ship's cracked hull and placed one hand flat against the metal. The hellfire moved from his palm into the ship's surface, the way water moves into dry sand, absorbed, spreading, following the path of the dark energy channels that Babidi had spent years carving into the vessel's infrastructure. The ritual's heartbeat rhythm hitched. Ghost Rider's burning eyes narrowed. "The dark energy feeding this ritual," he said, "has a source. Souls, suffering, cruelty." The hellfire spread further, running along the hull's seams like liquid. "I cannot stop what Buu is. But the fuel feeding his resurrection, every sinful act, every corrupted soul your ritual consumed to build toward this moment." The hellfire pulsed. "That I can address." The heartbeat rhythm stuttered again. Babidi made a sound like a man watching something precious slip over a cliff edge. "You're draining it," Gohan breathed, reading the energy shift with his senses. "You're pulling the dark energy out of the ritual." "Trying," Ghost Rider corrected. Because beneath his palm, deep in the ship's core, the egg pulsed once with a force that sent hellfire and Saiyan Ki and mountain rock and Babidi and everything else within 30 meters in all directions simultaneously. And in the ringing silence that followed, the heartbeat was louder than ever. And it was no longer alone.